Dajahao, hi guys, it's Janae and welcome back to my channel, and today I am continuing my read along for Modu, otherwise known as Silent Reading. It's a novel by a priest and they are soon to be releasing the first volume officially. I am very excited. We are on volume 4, however. Um, and yeah, I don't know why this is currently like this outfit is kind of giving me Beetlejuice right now, which is not something I associated with it before, but now I don't think I'm going to be able to unsee it. Um, anyway, quick note, I played around with the audio, and I don't know if this is better or worse than the previous stream's audio because this one is very like unclean, but it's loud. And then the previous stream's audio was, I would say, cleaner, but very soft. So it's kind of like the worst of both worlds. I don't know. Hi! I don't think I've seen you here in quite a while, if ever. I feel like I haven't seen. I want to recognize the screen name. That's what I'm trying to say, but I don't know if I've seen you here in a while. If I am recognizing the screen name correctly. Anyway, okay, I am clearly in a bit of a weird mood today. Sorry about that in advance. We are gonna attempt 3 hours if my sanity and voice holds. And if not, we're just gonna do the normal two where we take a 10-minute break in the middle of it. And I'm very excited because so far it's just been such a joy to be back with them, and also the humor that Priest just somehow imbues in all of her stories, even when the subject matter is quite serious. I just love for. So yeah, okay. See, I thought I recognized it, but maybe sometimes I delude myself. Okay. But anyway, hi and welcome. Again, it sounds like you've been here for a while. Okay, so I feel like I've said all I need to say and too much more. So I think we can more or less just get started. Somewhat be on time for once. Also, I do have tea here with me, which I sip to keep my throat from drying up. Um, but yeah, I think we're good to go. Let me just pull it up and pop out the chat. Okay, so that I can at least follow along to what is being said. Oh, actually, let me also just mute my desktop because sometimes that doesn't help things. Okay, let's get going. Chapter 94, Brohovinsky 4. When he'd gone out in the morning, the sun had been shining brightly, the sky clear enough to see for thousands of li. But around evening, clouds came out of nowhere to provocatively drop a snow shower. Oh, using his bicycle as a snowplow, Luo Wenzhou slid it along the ground as he walked. When he was about to reach the city bureau's gates, Taran suddenly came hurrying after him and hung a very festive wrapped box from his handlebar. You left so quickly. Are you in such a hurry to go home and cook? This is some cured meat my mom sent from home. All natural, eco-friendly food made from organically fed pigs. I've just been handing it out in the office. This is your share. Before Lu Wenzhou could say thank you, he saw Taran put his hand on the box of meat, his index finger quickly tapping on it 3 times. So some kind of signal. As soon as the weather turned cold, Taran had started wearing a downcoat like a tortoiseshell, wrapped up so firmly you could see nothing but his eyes. And when Joel looked over at him, he saw that there was no smile in his eyes, and immediately knew that this local specialty box didn't purely contain local specialities. Lowenjaw paused, then thanked him as if nothing were the matter and weighed the box in his hands. When I see the cured meat, I'll know it's really winter. Why so heavy? How much did your mom send you? A whole lot, Taran said. I even went and gave a box to Shenyang yesterday. Lowenjaw instantly froze. When Taran had tapped the box, he'd been indicating that there was something in it other than cured meat. Adding in these words, he meant that the thing came from Shenyang, Yang Zhengfeng's widow. The two of them silently exchanged a look. The only thing that could have come from Shenyang was something left behind by Yang Zhengfeng. Tentatively, Luo Wenjuo said, Shenyang doesn't like seeing us, and it's not a holiday right now. She didn't throw you out when you went over to bother her. Well, Yang had given up his life 3 years ago. If she had something, why was she only now willing to hand it over? Taran paused, something indescribable filling his gaze. Um, Hi! The night wind carrying snow was chilly and piercing. It could blow through your flesh straight to your lungs. The red banners at the city bureau's gates had been hung up for National Day and hadn't been taken down yet. They fluttered in the snowy wind, so red they seemed about to pierce the twilight. Lo and Jules stood up straight, suddenly having an ominous premonition. Shenyang, Shenyang went to the hospital last month. Taran subconsciously looked at the murky light, then aimlessly at his own feet, quietly saying, They found she has lymphoma. Lo Wenjuo was stunned. What? Late stage, Taran said, sounding as if the winter wind had choked him, pronouncing the words with difficulty. She doesn't she doesn't have long. I'm going to go see her. After a moment's staring, Lo and Joel suddenly turned and got on the bike, stepping on the pedals. What's going to happen to the child? She hasn't graduated yet. Taran grabbed his elbow, shaking his head at him. It's too late today. Go home. Don't disturb her rest. Saying so, Taran tapped again at the wrapped box of cured meat, meaningfully saying, And it's not like everyone likes you at a glance. She won't necessarily be happy to see you. Go home and eat well. I'm off. You ride safely. Taran. Lowendor spit out a white breath, saying at his back, Did she get sick because of Lao Yang? Is this all because Lao Yang died and she's been depressed ever since? Taran waved at him from afar, not answering. There was no answer to give. However they dug into the cause, it still wouldn't change the effect. At this point, it was too late to say anything. Perhaps it was fate. Oh, that hurts because I was just about to say it's not like it could really be pinpointed to that. Um, but also it doesn't change the outcome. Whether you had genius ability or magic on your side, however great a fortune you possessed, however vast your power and influence, none of it mattered. The box of cured meat Taran had hung on its handlebars really was heavy, encumbering Law and Jaw's front wheel. He went face first into the wind, his progress difficult. When he'd gone out in the morning, the bicycle's two wheels had been like a pair of magical wind and fire wheels. On his way back in the evening, they seemed to have become misshapen metal circles. As Lorwyn was riding the bicycle across the street, he glanced to the right, passing the parking lot at the shopping center's doors. He suddenly instinctively looked up, then immediately realized that the car he just passed looked somewhat familiar. Lord Joe quickly put his feet on the ground to brake the bicycle and turned his head to look, coming face to face with his own car. His head covered in bits of snow and ice, he opened his eyes wide and exchanged a helpless look with his car. The car's engine was running, letting out a droning sound. Snowflakes revolved in the warm light of the low beam headlights. Had Feidu come to pick him up? I can't remember, so I'm really hoping yes. Lo and Joe's heavy heart seemed to have had a um, maglev, I've never heard that word, installed. It rose in midair with a flutter, swimming around his chest. He focused, then casually strolled over to the car's window, bending down and planning to knock, when his surprise suddenly turned to fright. He didn't know how long Fedor had been waiting. He was curled up in the driver's seat, asleep. The heating inside the car was obviously turned up high, and he, perhaps afraid of the cold, had the doors and windows tightly sealed. A cold breath A cold breath inundated Lowenjaw's chest, his lungs nearly bursting, and he hit the car window a few times. Fedor! Fedor! When he was getting ready to break open the door, Fedor finally woke up. He moved somewhat hazily, as if he'd forgotten where he was, then noticed the sound next to him. Fedor rubbed his eyes and unlocked the car door. "Did you get off?" Before he finished asking the question, Lowenjaw grabbed his collar and pulled him out of the car, howling into his ear. "Were you trying to die, or do you have no idea, no common sense?" Fedor stumbled, suddenly pulled from the inside of the car that was as warm as springtime into the cold wintry air. He shivered, thoroughly waking up, realizing what he'd done. Fedor hadn't meant to smother himself. He'd gotten out of the car to stroll around while waiting for Lo and Joe. But he really couldn't stand the cold and had gone back to the car to warm up for a while. He just hadn't expected that his stay at the hospital would have injured him to such a degree. Before the blood had fully circulated to his hands and feet, he'd accidentally fallen asleep. Fedor very rarely did stupid things like this in front of others. He was quite upset. I actually... Go, go, go. Get the hell over there. In his rage, Lowenjaw didn't want to hear his explanation. Pushing and pulling, he tossed Fedor into the passenger seat, then charged around and got into the car, pulling out of the parking spot like a whirlwind, leaving a 10-meter trail of exhaust. Then he remembered something, and swearing, got out of the car and brought over the forgotten bicycle and box of meat, dragging them into his trunk. I was about to ask, like, what about the very things that you were thinking about nonstop 2 seconds ago? Oh, ugh, I wish we could get our hands on those. Um, he slammed the car door thunderously and furiously drove home. Fedor had reached his present age with little experience of people howling in his ear. His ears ran from Lowenjaw's outburst, and he hadn't quite pulled himself together like Lo Yugo after knocking over and breaking a porcelain bowl. After a period of dumb staring, he finally pulled himself together. To cover up the awkwardness, he showed an overly slick smile, put one hand on his head and the other very ill-manneredly, oh no, where on Lowenjaw's thigh. Lowering his voice, he said, "Shishong, are you so worried about me?" Lowenjaw didn't want to fool around with him. He slapped away his paw. "Get away." The invincible President Fei instantly changed tactics, slowing his voice. "I was just too cold and got in to warm up. I wasn't going to stay long. I was... oh, I was resting my eyes just now." Lowenjaw coldly said, "Were you resting your ears too?" "They do. Dot dot dot." Fedor's few sentences of justification started up a counter-reaction. Lowenjaw had recovered from his initial almost overpowering fear, and it was as if some button had been pressed. He took a deep breath and unleashed a lengthy and explosive lecture upon Fedor. Oh no. Lowenjaw naturally came by his superior ability. Oh, sorry. Lowenjaw naturally came by his superior ability to improvise lectures and scoldings from his father, starting from an enumeration of was that enumeration, my bad, of every shameful thing Fedu had ever done. He came down to him, thoroughly forgetting the doctor's orders as soon as he'd gotten out of the hospital, going out to play who knew where first thing in the morning, trying to make himself sick. Finally, he issued a rather forceful question in response to Fedu's paltry explanation. You're cold? If you're cold, why don't you wear long underwear? Oh no. Lumendra's not beating the old man accusations anytime soon, even though he's not that old. But like, this question rendered Fedu speechless. He could only keep quiet, listening to the lecture all the way home, not attempting to put in another word. Seeing that after going inside with a box of cured meat in one hand and the clanking bicycle under the other arm, Lowenjaw still showed no signs of ceasing hostilities, Fedu, without any warning, suddenly hugged him, kissing him like a surprise attack, this time saying the proper lines, Shishong, I was wrong. Surprise attack indeed. I feel surprised as well. Dot dot dot. Lowenjaw kept his face as stern as possible, but his voice relaxed uncontrollably. Don't give me that. Fedu lowered his head slightly, burying his face against his neck. He thought about it, then said, Can I make it up to you with my body? Oh my word, okay. I'm not okay. I hope you guys are. Lowenjaw had known he couldn't expect anything good to come out of that scoundrel's mouth. He lightly smacked the small of his back and then gave him the bicycle, saying, You can put the bike away in the basement. Get some exercise before we eat. You look like you need it. Fedu knew when to quit. He held the handlebars, pushing the big, crude bike into the basement. There was a full-length mirror on the cabinet in the stairwell. Coming back up, he carelessly looked up and found that there was a rather indistinct smile at the corner of his mouth. The bicycle's chain had been oiled. Fedu's neatly pressed pant leg had picked up a clear stain, a clean stain, that's an oxymoron if I've ever heard one, a clear stain in the process of moving the bike. He paused as if not understanding what he had to smile about. Just then, Owenjaw hurried him from the kitchen. Don't just wait around to eat. Come over here and help. Can you wash vegetables? The one-time domineering Director General, reduced to being a porter and vegetable washer lackey, scratched his nose. No. Lowenjaw said, You can't do anything. You're as useless as Lo Yiguo. And you... And you little... you little whelps. Sorry, why did my brain not want to do that? Lo Yiguo was harmlessly licking its paws, not knowing how it had ended up dragged in. Hearing these words, it was beside itself with rage, jumping down from the top of the fridge, landing with perfect precision on Lawwindjaw's step, stamping furiously, then taking its heels and dashing off. In the winter night, with the frost-like flowers, the city was ablaze with light, and there was also unknown corners where unimaginable shadows spread. Those are two very beautiful sentences, damn. The girl was hiding inside a garbage bin, her feet in a sticky mess. Oh great, we're here. Guys, if you have a pillow, if you are like me and you need a pillow, I would suggest maybe grabbing a pillow right about now. The pungent smell constantly assaulted her nasal cavity. She was trembling, curled tightly into a ball, biting her own wrist. In the dark, she heard a man's rough breathing not far off, and the dull sound of a sharp blade cutting through bone. She was 15 years old, as tall as an adult. Perhaps she ought to act like an adult, push open the garbage bin, and go out to fight him. There had been two of them at first, 2 against 1. They may have had a chance. But she was too cowardly. She never dared to face things, didn't dare to resist at all. She always instinctively hid. Suddenly, the sluggish and heavy footfalls sounded again, coming closer and closer. The girl's heart shuddered along with the steps. In the extremity of fear, her whole body started to go numb. The footsteps suddenly paused, stopping outside of the garbage bin. How far away was he? 1 meter? Half a meter? Or 30 centimeters? The girl held her breath. Separated by a thin plastic bin from an insane killer, she seemed to already smell the blood on him. Suddenly, there was a gentle knock on the plastic garbage bin. A boom. The girl's tense nerves instantly collapsed. She shivered violently, the metal zipper of her jacket knocking against the side of the plastic bin. There was a strange, soft laugh in the dark. In a hoarse voice, a man crooned a wildly off-key song. Little rabbit, be good, open up as you should. Ugh! That just... Oh! The girl gave a heartening... Heart... there we go. Heart-rending. There we go. I tried, I failed, but we're continuing. Shriek. Not 2 meters from where she was hiding lay a boy's corpse. His eyes had been smashed, and his limbs had all been chopped off. They lay in a neat row beside him. The torso was covered with Yufeng Middle School's uniform jacket. It was 10:30 at night. Oh, they censored the hell out of how badly mangled and destroyed the corpse was in the show. Yeah. Rowanjo locked up everything in the house that contained caffeine, held down Fedu's head, and gave him a cup of milk to drink, forcing him to go to sleep. It's 10:30. Fedu looked at his watch, scoffing at this regimen of the middle-aged and elderly. Never mind the nightlife, the social scene hasn't even properly gotten started yet. Shishong, let's talk it over. Lowenjo refused negotiations, rejecting him with one sentence. Shut up, lie down and sleep. Sorry, I don't know why that's so funny. Fady thought this brazen dictatorship of Lowejo, sorry, was very unreasonable. He was getting ready to protest when he saw Lowenjo get a pair of handcuffs out of his pockets. Okay, I'm not prepared. What the hell? I know that nothing salacious is gonna be happening, but still. Feidu wisely submitted to the circumstances, immediately lying down without making a sound. Lowenjo stayed with him until around midnight. When he was sure Feidu was fully asleep, he got up and kissed him gently, leaving the bedroom and closing the door. He got the box of cured meat Taran had given him out of the kitchen storage room. Amidst the smell assaulting his nose, he found a thick folder. As soon as he opened it, a handwritten letter fell out. I'm very curious to revisit the show and see how these scenes played out differently, because obviously they had to, but the show did such a good job with censoring without censoring that I'm just having trouble pinpointing what actually happened at which point in the show versus now in the book. This was the kind of red square writing paper that very few people would use in this era. Written all over in fountain pen in a handwriting Lo Wen-jo had seen countless times, it belonged to the old criminal policeman Yang Zhengfang. The letter was addressed to his wife. Yang Zhengfang wrote, Jiahui, I'm writing this letter just in case. just in case I die unexpectedly one day and you find what I've left behind. I hope it won't put you and Shinshin in danger. In my profession, no one wants to endanger his family, but I have no one else to entrust this to. Hi! Um, Wondrel's heart lurched. When you've finished making arrangements for my funeral, at all costs, remember not to contact anyone at the city bureau. There are people there who have changed. I don't know who they are. You must be careful. Wenjul and Taran and the other children were all brought up by me. I'm certain of them, but they're all too young. They may have an abundance of heart, but their abilities are insufficient. Don't involve them, and don't get too close to them, in order to avoid the younger generation making a pointless sacrifice. Okay, I'm not going to spoil anything, but if you've watched the show, you know how painful that sentence is. Okay, chapter 95, Borovinsky 5. Will and Joel carried the craft paper envelope, went to the balcony, opened the window, and lit a cigarette. Igor, attracted by the scent of cured meat, was swept by the icy breeze and immediately ran off shivering, tail between its legs. Before he was the, Before him was the coldest night of the year, behind him an indulgently warm room, and in his hands a final testament, the paper of which had been crumpled. I don't know who my enemies are, and I don't know how long they have existed. They have colossal organization and vast wealth, hold countless privileges and high-quality resources, but they still won't be satisfied. They still have to get what they want, in spite of others, placing themselves above the law. I suspect that these people are connected with many murderers, even that they've been privately supporting wanted sorry, even that they've been privately supporting wanted criminals, using them as assassins. At this point, Windrow's hand tapping out cigarette ash paused, lightly trembling in spite of himself. His gaze swept once more over the words privately supporting wanted criminals, using them as assassins. In the Zhou clan case, the killer who had run over Dong Xiaoqing had been a wanted criminal who had obtained a high-quality false ID from somewhere and was making his living as an assassin. Amidst the darkness, there seemed to be a slender thread passing through the thick haze, dimly revealing a fragile structure. Jiahui, do you still remember Gu Zhao, my one-time good friend, my brother? To this day, no one dares to mention him. He has turned into a disgraceful history, needing to be covered up at the edges of group photos. Though Teacher Fun went astray, he was right when he said that Gu Zhao wasn't that kind of person. There had to be something else behind it. Teacher Fun has come to grief. Has come to grief? Because it's not Teacher Fun has come to grieve, it's come to grief. Maybe they meant succumbed to grief? Anyway, but he did it for the sake of private vengeance. Sometimes I think, why am I doing this? I don't know. I've been working for over 20 years. Reasonably speaking, I should withdraw from the front lines, focus on management, attend meetings, and give speeches, not deal with all kinds of criminals every day. I should go on steadily to retirement, see Xin graduate, and start a family, take care of myself, and live out my allotted lifetime. I should pretend that I don't know anything. I truly want to be that way, to do my duty. No one could criticize me for it. But as soon as I close my eyes, I think of Teacher Fun, think of Gu Zhao, Think of those who died unsatisfied on National Road 327, and of those children whose whereabouts are still unknown. Jahui, I can't do it. I hope you can forgive me. This world is too complicated. Countless sordid things have been accumulating underground for a long time, like chronic illnesses that can never heal. But I still think that time is a series of great waves constantly rushing towards the shore. Each time a wave rises, it bears down menacingly, but every time it flows out again, it sweeps away some of the stains. For example, we now have all kinds of investigative technology. We can detect lies. We can compare DNA. Perhaps very soon the surveillance camera network will be everywhere, covering every corner. Perhaps when the next wave hits, all of this will be revealed under the bright light of day. If I'm gone then, please see that day in my place, and hand these things over to those who can continue the investigation. Again, if you watch the show, this hurts. When Lorwyn finished reading, he exhaled a long breath, carefully folding the letter according to the creases that were already there. The letter young Jingfeng had written to his wife wasn't long, but there were a few parts he didn't quite understand. But he understood why Luo Yang had said that he had the heart but not the ability. He strove to remember the days before Lao Yang's sacrifice. He vaguely recalled that young Zhengfeng had been smoking like a chimney. When others had asked him about it, he'd only said that he was worried about his daughter's university entrance exams, and they, a group of ignorant youngsters, had made fun of him for it. What had Lao Yang felt then when he looked at him? Had he thought he was useless? Therefore, like a solitary hero with no one to rely on, the old criminal policeman had walked alone into the darkness on his dangerous path. Lowenjaw stared emptily out the window for a moment, then turned and went towards the study. Royugo was just walking back and forth in front of the bedroom door beside the study, looking like it wanted to go in. As Lowenjaw passed by, he bent down and lifted its two front paws, hanging them over his arm, carrying the cat into the study. Don't bother him. Royugo mowed and rolled into a ball, settling down on his legs, watching as he logged into the intranet and entered the keywords National Road 327. Basically all the material that came up had been scanned in. This had evidently been very long ago. Another old case. It was rather hard to read. This had been a sensational business. This had been a sensational business 15 years ago. National Road 327 was a highway outside of Yan City, detouring around Lotus Mountain, constructed over 30 years ago. It had once been one of the major traffic arteries. Later, Later, it had weathered many changes and gradually been superseded by the land reclamation highway that passed through the mountain, becoming deserted. Aside from those who were going to one of the few small towns along National Road 327, very few people would deliberately avoid the mountain road to take it. This case of serial murders had occurred along that desolate road. The victims had all been short-haul truck drivers. Short-haul truck drivers usually went on the road alone to economize, I think, and they had to carry their belongings on their persons. They were comparatively soft targets. Perhaps the killer had believed in folk superstition, thinking that a person who died by violence would spontaneously develop photographic abilities, recording an image of the last thing they had seen before their death. Therefore, the victim's eyes had been smashed, their condition in death appearing especially miserable. And we just heard about that 2 seconds ago. Okay. The body of the first murdered driver had been abandoned beside the truck, having been stabbed a dozen times with fatal wounds on the chest. Everything he'd had on him had vanished, with not even a penny left behind. The truck's container, meanwhile, had been missing one small-scale refrigerator. Aside from the driver, there had also been a heap of messy footprints at the scene. Analysis showed that they had likely been made by 2 men and 1 woman. Interesting. Apart from this, there had also been a suspicious blood stain on the front wheel. Because it wasn't human blood, it didn't attract attention at first. I would say because it's not human blood, it should attract more attention. Because, like, why the hell is there a random animal, assumedly's blood, on a steering wheel at the scene of the murder? Less than 2 months later, there was another similar case on National Road 327. The killers had perhaps learned from experience. Aside from the eyeballs having been smashed as before, the second victim hadn't been wildly stabbed, but had died at one strike. The victim had been short and skinny. He'd been crouching in front of the truck's doors at his death, and there weren't many defensive wounds on him. According to conjecture, for the sake of for his life and safety, he had obediently handed over his property when the knife-wielding robbers had threatened him, not expecting the criminals would be unwilling to let him go. Entirely unresisting, he had been fatally stabbed from behind. For the third murder, the killer's criminal methods went up another grade. This time, they had learned to play with the victim. After the victim had been killed with a single strike, they had dug out his eyes and chopped off his limbs, arranging them beside him so savagely that it was infuriating. Great. Thank you for that. The local police had quickly handed the serial robbery and murder case over to the Yan City's City Bureau, and the City Bureau had established a special investigation team. But when Joe's gaze stopped on the names of the special investigation team's leads, seeing that the team leader was young Jung Feng, while the deputy team leader was an unfamiliar name, Guo Jiao. Joe frowned, now and then stroking the cat. If this Gu Jiao was an elder who had worked with Lao Yang and had gone through many cases, why had no one ever mentioned him? Lo Yiguo had only wanted to find somewhere to sleep. Settling down with difficulty on the litter box attendant's lap, it still had to bear with all this fidgeting, so it hit the litter box attendant's hand with the pads of its paws, leapt off his knees, and ran off. Zhou paid no attention to it, continuing to scroll down. The special investigation team had found that in all 3 robberies, the looted truck's front wheels had small quantities of animal blood on them. Thereupon, the special investigation team's manpower had performed a large-scale search along the national road, focusing on areas with a high incidence of accidents where the road was narrow. As expected, near the location of the most recent murder, they had found skid marks in a dog's body. Why a dog? The special investigation team suspected that the criminals had used small animals as bait, lying in ambush along the pitch-black and narrow stretches of road. When the target vehicle drove by, they would suddenly throw out the dog, forcing the truck to slow down. then sending out the gang's female accomplice to nearly get run over, forcing the truck to stop and luring the victim outside. This is kind of terrifying because it sounds very similar to things that happen here. National Road 327 wasn't a set out of a journey to the west. People seeing a woman on her own wouldn't be very much on their guard. As soon as the victim got out of the truck, her accomplices would come out to implement the robbery and murder. Through informers, the Special Investigation Team had found a peddler who captured and illegally sold stray dogs. Following this lead, they had in the end determined the killers. The principal offenders were a pair of brothers from a small town by the National Road. The older brother was named Lu Guoxin, the younger brother Lu Guosheng. Their accomplice was a female delinquent, Lu Gaoxin's girlfriend. There was nothing worth saying about Lu Gaoxing. He was an idle, unemployed young man with a record of imprisonment for robbery. The younger brother, Lu Guosheng, however, was comparatively special. He was a university dropout. This Lu Guosheng had been frequently absent. Because his conduct had been poor and he had failed out of too many courses, the school had postponed his graduation and withheld his diploma. Afterwards, he'd managed to get hired as an office worker at a small transport company, then got fired because of a fight. He'd become increasingly embittered after returning home and determined to get revenge on society, easily fitting in with his scumbag big brother, plotting out the series of robberies. This is a lot. I forgot how brutal this case was because frankly there's just one scene that stuck out from this case and it was not anything, well, not anything related to the plot, but like plot lights, relationship heavy. Having looted the goods, the three of them spent lavishly, easy come and easy go. When the money was all spent, they started worrying about their next haul. But Lu Guosheng wasn't like the other two. He was a natural antisocial element. He wasn't interested in the pocket change the truck drivers were carrying, but in carrying out murder after murder he'd found the pleasure in it. He was the key figure in this. Of the other two, one was a thug and the other was bait, attendants at his beck and call. The police quickly arrested Lu Guoxin and his girlfriend, but Lu Guosheng, the most dangerous one among them, had fled and vanished off the face of the earth, of course. Hoi. Lu Wenzhou input the full name Lu Guosheng and found that his wanted notice had yet to be removed. 15 years had passed, and he still hadn't been caught. In a society where even a drug user would be reported by their neighbors, how could a vicious wanted criminal hide for 15 years? Unless he had run to some uninhabited place and was living as a hermit. But could a person like Lu Guosheng really have endured the loneliness and the desire to harm? Lu Wenzhou rubbed the center of his brows, lit another cigarette, and went through the other things in the craft paper folder. The first page in the folder was a photograph. Lu Wenzhou had seen it countless times in Director Lu's office, but Director Lu had arranged this group picture so that one person was hidden by the frame. This time he could finally see it in full. The fifth person was standing in a corner with young Zhengfang pulling his elbow. He didn't seem very comfortable with the camera. His posture was rather reserved, and his wide grin looked somewhat forced. Gu Zhao. Was this person Gu Zhao? Lu Wenzhou tapped twice on the keyboard, searching for Gu Zhao, but there was very little information. only a sketchy disciplinary report. Lowenthal read through the disciplinary report a few times over, seeing words like serious breach of discipline and illegal activity. There were no clues as to what this person had actually done. Aside from the letter from Shenyang and the old photograph, the craft paper folder also contained a stack of candid photographs that had come from who knows where. There were men and women, young and old. They seemed no different from ordinary city residents. But when Joel thought about it, then scrolled through the wanted notices. In less than half an hour, he had found quite a few people matching the photographs in the internal network's database. Without exception, they were all escaped criminals. What's bothering me about this is it feels like Gu Zhao's situation that I don't want to spoil just yet in case people are um, like listening to this for the first time. But it feels like there should be more on the record, is all I'll say. Just then, the door of the study creaked open, suddenly breaking off Lo and Joe's train of thought. Without looking up, he scolded, Loigo, how annoying are you? I don't think that's Loigo. Then the power cable at his feet moved. When Joel looked down and saw Loigo's fangs bared, attacking the power cable. The black cord was shiny with saliva. So who was at the door? Your other cat, sir. Lo and Joel immediately looked at the door, finding Feidu leaning against the door frame, looking at him. I went out to pour myself a glass of water, said Feidu. Lo and Joel shivered, subconsciously closing the page he was looking at, then flustered, stuffed Lao Yang's folder in the drawer. He stood up. I'll pour it for you. Oh, I remember the scene. I feel like I'm gonna need more pillows. Hold on. I just remember being emotionally devastated by the scene in the show. Law and Joel only came around after pouring the water. Fidu was a grown-up, and he had arms and legs. Why did he need someone else to pour a glass of water for him? And why had Law and Joel, going online in the middle of the night, acted like he'd been caught committing adultery? Feidu silently took the glass from his hands, brushing Law and Joel's fingertips. He suddenly thought, me staying here is actually inconvenient for him too. He had to get up in the middle of the night and hide in the study when he wanted to look at something in his own home. Hiding like this under the same roof was a strain on both of them. Why was this necessary? Pedro looked down, considering these words, thinking over and over of how to bring it up. But when he'd finished drinking the water, he still couldn't say anything. He was like a traveler walking through a desert, his whole body parched. And Lo and Joe and his little house were like a half-full bottle of water dropping out of the heavens. Even if it contained arsenic, even if cold intellect was prying his fingers open one by one, he still couldn't bear to let go. The two of them remained in mutual silence for a moment. Then Lo and Joe suddenly spoke. I'm investigating the truth behind my shufu's death. A new lead has just turned up. Okay, I feel like maybe this is a bit different from what I'm remembering. Feidu hadn't expected him to reveal this. He was startled. There's too much involved. The fewer people know, the better, Rowanjo said, looking directly at him. I'm not eliminating the possibility that this may have to do with you. There are many things I haven't cleared up right now, so I have no way to assess whether or how much I can tell you. So you'll have to give me a few days. I've been frank up to this point. Does that work for you? Okay, we'll talk about it in a second. Let me just finish this out.
Bowenjo relaxed. Oh wait, sorry. Feidu had never seen such a clear analysis of secrecy and candor. He stared blankly for a while, then subconsciously nodded. That works. Bowenjo relaxed. Watching Feidu slowly drink the water, he'd suddenly had a premonition that if he didn't say something, events would have happened that he was unwilling to see. He put an arm around Feidu's shoulder. Now you'd better. Without any warning, Feidu pulled his wrist, pushing him. Mowenjo's balance faltered, and he reeled back against the arm of the couch. Feidu pressed him against the couch with his knees, tilting his head to look at him. Suddenly he smiled. Although, Shishon, you can't expect to get rid of me using only your words. And that's the end of the chapter. Okay, well, we're at the end of the first hour, more or less, so let's quickly talk about this and then take the 10-minute break and we'll be back for the next. Does it sound a bit quiet? Oh no. My mic hasn't moved as far as I know. But yeah, so what I find interesting with this is the fact that I'm vaguely remembering how the scene played out in the show, and they somehow managed to make it feel more tension filled. And I think that was such a good way to do it in the show because you can't have whatever that was that the chapter just ended on in the show. So instead, they had to have this very clear build up of potential resentment from Pei Su to Luo Zhao over this very clear secret being kept and the fact that Luo, when Luo Zhao then manages to turn the tables and is like, look, I'm gonna be as honest with you as I can be. I can't really tell you too much, but I value you too much to keep this a secret, and I see where your head is at. So it's interesting because it's very much the same thing we just saw here, but they definitely tweaked it a little bit to make it feel more intense in the show so that we could still have that level of emotion that we got here because of what Priestley is able to show in the novel versus in the show. I hope that made sense. Um, yes, that they really did a great job with that because they obviously had to change the source of a lot of the conflict and yet still managed to keep it the same. Like I would say this is what a good adaptation looks like, especially considering the limitations that they had to work in. For me, that's why I would consider Modal Zushi The Untamed to also be a good adaptation because it adapted the spirit of the novel even when it couldn't completely stick to the word or letter of the novel. Um, okay, so I am gonna take a 10-minute break, get myself some new tea, and then we'll be back to do at least 2 more chapters, hopefully. Okay, we are back. I hope the audio is still okay. I'm not sure why it would suddenly sound softer than it was before. Okay, I think we can just more or less start again. I am considering doing 3 hours tonight. I think I mentioned this. So we'll see how my voice holds up at the end of this hour and then go from there if you guys are up for it. Okay, thank you. Then, Chapter 96, Rehovinsky 6. Lo and Joel marveled at Feidu's godlike ability to change his mood, helplessly reaching out to prop himself against the back of the couch. You, Feidu quickly searched him, first removing the hateful handcuffs, then taking half a second to consider whether he should retain them for his own use. Okay. Then he wisely abandoned the thought. He didn't have Mr. Policeman's professional familiarity and could easily end up hoisted with his own petard. What the hell is that? Thereupon he raised his hand and threw the handcuffs into the dining room. Bonjour, ... Wisdom grows out of experience. Very good. The child would be able to hold his own out in the world. Bonjour carefully held his waist, sighing. Do you know you aren't supposed to do strenuous exercise now? It doesn't have to be strenuous. Don't you like it a little more gentle? Fadu pushed a knee between his legs. Guys, I'm not mentally prepared for anything right now. His hands, already cold after having left the covers not long ago, slid under Roland's clothes, so cold it made him give a start. Fadu kissed him, quietly, as though raving in his sleep. He said, "You're going to like it. Trust in my technique." If I could scream, I would. Roland looked at Fadu in some surprise. Wait a minute. What did you say? You may have misunderstood something. ... Fadu met his gaze. Two inverted images reflected in his eyes, as if they had encircled Lowenjo entirely, refracting layer after layer of light, unbelievably dazzling. Then he smiled at Lowenjo. Good. He pulled out the gun. He went there, okay? Lowenjo couldn't resist sucking in a breath. His scalp went numb, and there was an instantaneous change in his body. Of course, Fadu felt it. Pursuing his advantage, he pressed lower and lower on his back. "I want you." This had originally been just a casual line of flirtation, but the instant he said it, it raised a mighty uproar in Fadu's heart, as if an uninvited spring breeze had ruptured a vast field of snow, creating something out of nothing, sweeping everything away, the enormous echoes surging through his heart, quivering endlessly, as if he'd inadvertently spat up a bloody piece of his true heart. Fadu involuntarily closed his eyes, almost piously finding Lowenjo's somewhat dry lips, repeating the words in his mind. "I want you," he thought. All his life he'd constantly dodged, constantly struggled, and constantly broken away. There had never been a person or thing he'd ever been reluctant to leave. I I thought Feidu/Peisu was devastating in the show, but hearing his internal monologue at points makes it even worse. This was the first time he had been seized by a strange longing, invisible waves rising in his calm chest, submerging his keen senses. Feidu even temporarily forgot all his routines and techniques, his mouth full of honeyed words growing silent. He could only follow his instincts in drawing near the quarry he seemed to have been pursuing for ages. Lowenjo had endured his seductions time after time, thinking he was about to become a great personage who had broken free of his vulgar urges and attained a textbook level of incorruptible by riches or rank, unbending before the powerful. Sorry, that's thunder if you can hear that in the background. He hadn't expected that on the eve of victory, the enemy's offensive would ascend a grade out of nowhere. Onward. He had no time to work out what was different. His iron will crumpled at the sugar-coated bullet. The final bits of his intellect were only sufficient to give a hard-pressed cry, reminding him, "The couch is too hard. It's easy to get her to go back to the bedroom. Don't forget to lock the door." We might need a prayer circle at this point. I don't know for what, but we're gonna need it. Then his long-winded intellect was abandoned in the unfortunate living room along with his shirt. "Say something if I hurt you, and tell me if you can't take it, alright?" Lowendraw spoke into Feidu's ear, his breathing rapid. Feidu's hair was stark black against the snow-white pillowcase. Lowendraw could only maintain a roughly human appearance by gritting his teeth. "I know you like to torture yourself, but I don't like that. I don't like you being in pain." "Oh, say it loud for the people in the back, that hurts." Feidu didn't have the attention to spare to consider the meaning behind his words, because he was only now finding out that he and Lowenthal perhaps had different views on certain subjects. Yeah, it sounds like both of you want to top, and I am all out of guesses as to who's gonna win. I think if I know Priest, it's gonna be Heisu. But not gonna lie, in the show, Lowenjo was giving service top energy, so I'd be here for that. No. Feidu gave a dry laugh. Wait a minute. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Lowenjo caressed the somewhat obtruding bone of Feidu's wrist and pressed it against the pillow, licked his own canine tooth, and began to interrogate him. "Who was it that told you I liked to bottom?" "We're having this conversation." Just out of the hospital, only Feidu's self-awareness was functioning well. Now the weak function of his heart and lungs was revealed. He was almost breathless. As a well-known defender of ladies, while he was in an awkward position, he still didn't particularly want to give up the name. So he was silent. I am gonna guess Lan Chao. Oh no. Lowenjo was amazed. "They've gotten you into this mess, and you're still restraining yourself?" Fairy thought about it, and saw the sense in this. He thereupon came to a rapid decision. "Lang Xiao, oh no." Oh wait, that's Chow. That's not Chow. My bad. Oh. Lowendraw expressionlessly concluded his brief interrogation and lightly ground his teeth. Good. Very good. Didn't know who the traitor hidden among the shadows was, but he caught this ingrate, at any rate. The night was long. Igor came to the door of the master bedroom time and time again, jumping up to pull on the handle, discovering to its surprise that the door was locked from inside. Stop. Not him having to lock the door against his own cat. Its whiskers shook its bean-sized brain, pondering for a while, feeling that everything was very unusual today. Bored, Uyghur ran a few circles, chasing its tail. Then, finally, unable to think of an explanation, it charged into its long-used cat bed, where it stretched hugely. Oh yes, there was also a talkative female comrade who was perhaps going to have to eat cilantro filled buns for breakfast tomorrow. Fadu thought he just closed his eyes when it began to get light. So they were up for quite a while, I would assume. He woke when the first sliver of morning light pierced in through the crack in the curtains. Only he didn't want to move. While Jaw had been so careful as to be somewhat annoying, it had still been rather difficult. Fedu had been tormented half the night by his wounds intermittently acting up. In the end, he'd perhaps been too tired and fallen asleep, and perhaps he had simply passed out. At any rate, his wounds hurting didn't impact his sleep, so he hadn't said anything. Fedu turned his head and looked at Lo Wenjiao, who was wrapped around him and let his busy thoughts go blank and roam freely for a good while. His disordered mind finally returned to its proper place, and he belatedly thought, what did he mean I like to torture myself? Oh wow, you're like 12 hours late on that, it feels. Though I seriously wonder if this is a favorite trope of priests, the bottom not realizing till the very end seems to happen in most of her novels. Priests always good at keeping people guessing. I am actually quite surprised that we ended up with Paisu bottoming. I like the idea of it in the sense of Paisu being so distant emotionally for most of the first half of the novels, and then being able to be vulnerable and kind of let go of power in a sense. Like, not that that's really saying anything, but yeah, it's a nice idea to think of Fedu allowing himself to be cared for in that way instead of feeling like he has to put on a front or anything like that. Um, and I'm getting way too like symbolic about it, but yeah, I think it does make sense the more I think about it. Okay, considering it, he thought it could have been because of his hospital stay. There was no privacy in front of the medical personnel, and they'd of course had to clean away the scrawling tattoo sticker. The electric shock scars would have been uncovered. So, did Lowendraw think he was an intense S&M enthusiast? I mean, that's actually more of a logical conclusion than what is actually the truth, to be fair. Fedu was caught between laughter and tears when Lowendraw's phone, which he'd thrown at the bedside, rang. At first, Fedu paid it no mind, but while the ringtone was about to blow off the roof, Lowendraw was still sleeping like a dead dog.
too soon. That sentence is too soon after what we know about the traffic robberies. Showing absolutely no signs of movement, Feydeau could only gently push aside the arms wrapped around him, awkwardly raised his upper body, and reached past Lowenjaw to get the phone. When his fingers had just reached it, Lowenjaw, half asleep, pulled him back down, hugging him tighter. This person was selectively deaf, refusing to listen to the cry of 5 rings. He rubbed his face against Feydeau's neck, rolled over, and continued to sleep. What I wouldn't give to have seen this scene in live action, because it just sounds so soft. But I'm still happy with what we got. Like, it really was such a good adaptation. As a veteran problem case, when it came to getting out of bed, Captain Law could commit all manners of crime to manage another 5 minutes of sleep without any shame. Unfortunately, when he had shared a bed with the cat, Louis had taken none of this. He didn't get up on time to make. If he didn't get up on time to make offerings to it, it would jump on him from on top of the wardrobe, crashing down to make the dead rise. Owen Joel had a tremendous capacity for lazing around in bed and no opportunity to put it to use. This time he'd finally gotten a chance to put his revolting behavior on display, so he absolutely had to get his full of loading around. Fede looked at the phone screen. Darling? Telephone? No, not the darling. I was not prepared for a pet name. I'm gonna need a moment. I'm sorry. These are the moments where you realize how ridiculous you are as a reader, because I'm sitting here internally screaming, and I have to just keep reading. Oh, okay. Lowenjaw turned over and lay on him, unconsciously stroking Feydeau's arms for a while. Then he murkily groaned. Answer it. Taran's first phone call had already disconnected because it hadn't been picked up for too long. He was evidently richly experienced in this matter. He quickly called a second time. Feydeau had no way out. He could only answer, "It's me. I can't get him to wake up. I'll put the phone next to his ear and you can make do with saying what you have to say." Huh? Huh. Taran first babbled out some meaningless filler words. After looking around for an age, he finally found his tongue. "All right. Well, something's happened. Rather urgent. Can you get him to hurry over?" Feydeau said, "I can try." Taran gave a dry laugh. "You just got out of the hospital. Look after your health. You shouldn't. Well, I mean, you know what I mean." Oh, he fully knows what's going on between them. I mean, he is a detective, so I guess it makes sense, but somehow I forgot that he maybe knew. Um, Fairy loves his pet names one night and they're already like this. It's kind of great. I love for Priest's domesticity. She writes it so well. What Taran meant was perhaps that he thought that Feydeau had stewed Lowenjaw in a pot and eaten him. Feydeau sighed towards the ceiling, putting the phone speaker to Lowendraw's ear. Taran didn't know whether the person on the line had changed. He just kept talking. "Wasn't there that case a few days ago of the group of middle school students running away? No one took it seriously at first, but one of the boys died last night. Reasonably speaking, the case shouldn't have come to the city bureau." Lowenjaw silently opened his eyes. The killer smashed his eyes and chopped off his limbs and put them to one side. Lowenjo said, "Where?" "In a back alley in the Gulor district," Soran said heavily. "Captain Law, you have to get here as soon as possible." Lowenjo got himself ready with inhuman speed. When he was running out the door, Feidu had just finished buttoning his shirt sleeves. When he had put on a knitted vest and hadn't yet smoothed it out, Lowenjo ran back in. Feidu glanced at the unlocked study door, understanding. He very considerately pretended not to know. Without looking up, he said, "Did you forget something?" "I forgot this." Lowenjo strode up in front of him. Under his stunned gaze, he bent down and kissed him fiercely, feeling up and down his body. Seeing that he really didn't look like he was in pain, he then grabbed Freddy's hand and slapped the back of it twice, scolding, "You wretch, who told you to provoke me?" "He was just standing there." "What do you mean last night?" "Feidu, dot dot dot." Having completed this swaggering display, Lowenjo looked at his watch and ran off like the wind again. The little tornado he'd brought with him took a long time to disperse. Feidu slowly walked to the front door, taking out the keys Lowenjo had forgotten there, exchanging a helpless look with Loibo. He suddenly said to the cat, "At his age, your dad should be a little steadier." Hugo gave a soft cry, courteously expressing, "I agree with anything you say, as long as you feed me." I didn't think it was possible to love Hugo even more than I already do, but I do. Also, I'm sorry, I don't know how badly the rain is disrupting the sound of the mic, but I don't want to stop reading right now, so I hope it's okay still. The domesticity, yes, and I adore how much Window trusts Feiju in the book. Okay, cool, thank you. Okay, I have to say, I think, like, thinking back on the show, I feel like there was a fair amount of trust from Lowenjo to Peisu, but I think a lot of it was also just both of them reading into each other's actions because they weren't quite on the same page yet. Um, it's interesting because it feels like in the show when they get together is different from when they get together in the book. Just like by reading the subtext, it very much feels like they get together way later on. I don't know how else to explain it. Between one breath and the next, Feidu's chest ached dully. He rested against the front door for a while, then closed the study door and shuffled over to open a can of cat food for Loigo. Loigo's mood was always very stable when it had eaten and drunk its fill. It circled around Feidu, looking for pets, making a ring of fur around his pant leg. "That's so cute." Feidu watched it for a while, then finally bent down and tentatively held out a hand towards it. When his fingertips had just touched the cat, the phone suddenly rang. Feidu pulled back his hand as if awakening from being possessed. He pinched the bridge of his nose and resumed his cold and considering expression, picking up the phone. "Teacher Pan?" Pan Yu Tung didn't waste time making small talk. He said, "If you think you can do it, then you can come back." Feidu smiled quietly, waiting for the rest of what he had to say. "But remember this," Pan Yu Tung said coldly. "I don't know who you are, and I don't care what you want, but I'm the head of the picture album project this time. Any materials you request at the City Bureau, you need my signature and approval.
or else you won't see a single word. It seemed that after reading his paper, Teacher Pan had made inquiries about him. Only Phaedra knew that Fei-Chun's car crash had been reaping what he'd sowed. To an outsider, especially to someone who knew something of the truth about the previous iteration of the picture album project, he would seem like an orphan enduring in silence, devoted to investigating the truth behind his father's car crash. Of course, said Phaedra. Wasn't it always that way? When Lowenjo arrived, police cars had already tightly surrounded the scene. The Gulu district was a scenic spot. There were hardly any residential neighborhoods around, and to protect the old buildings, the nearest hotel was over 500 meters away. Here the day was as bustling as the night was silent. The body is still here. We were waiting for you to have a look before letting them take it away. Taran came out to meet him. As he spoke, he looked Lowenjo up and down, feeling that this Lowenjo was somewhat different from the usual one. Dragged out of bed first thing in the morning, he didn't show even a trace of impatience. His mood was very steady. He was like a lion that had spent half a lifetime bristling and then turned into a big, soft cat when someone had come by to smooth its fur. That description, I'm fine. I love Louis Go so much. I wish he could have been seen more in the show. I'm just glad they actually had him in the show because obviously they needed to have him in the show, but also I have experienced animals like that being written out of the show for filming convenience before. I feel like that the censorship forced them to create the conflict from Owen's side. I didn't want to give spoilers, but the part where it feels like they get together in the show is also a different, very significant scene in the book. Okay. Um, Lo and Joe nodded at first, then asked in confusion, "What do you keep looking at me for?" More embarrassed party than the interested parties, Taran gave a dry cough and averted his gaze. To this day, he still wasn't used to the entirely different relationship between the two of them. Owenjo sighed, saying sincerely to Taran, "Tao Tao, the young lady lives in the same building as you. You see her every day. She's interested in you. And look at you. I don't know what you get up to all day. It's been half a year. I'm worried sick about you. If I were in your place, I'd figure be having a shotgun wedding by now. At the rate they're moving, it's not impossible, honestly." Taran, dot dot dot. When Momojo had finished playing the large-tailed wolf, he got down to business, passing through the cordon and entering the scene. This was a small alley with antique facades pressing in on both sides. The little street between them was narrow and deep. There were two big plastic trash bins at the side of the street. One of them had fallen over, just blocking the body behind it. If the sanitation workers hadn't been carefully doing their jobs, the body may not have been found for some time. Before Law and Joe had gone close, a strong smell of blood assaulted his nose. It was almost impossible to tell what the boy's features had originally looked like. The cut-off limbs laid out next to him threw themselves into Law and Joe's eyes, aligning perfectly with the pictures he'd seen last night from the National Road 327 case. Yeah. Shao Hai Yang had been taking pictures of the body. As he was photographing, he thought of something, and his movements paused. He zoned out, and was startled when Lo and Joe went by him, hastily standing up straight. "Captain Law." I feel so strangely validated right now because I vaguely remembered constantly thinking that the guy with the glasses in the show was called Shao Hai Yang, and then was very confused when I realized, oh, it was Shao Han Yang, but I
just chalks it up to my terrible track record with names. And now I think it's because in the book it's Xiao Hai Yang, and I didn't realize I was getting confused about that. Anyway, sorry. Lo and Joe responded, then looked closely at the boy's body. Have the parents been notified? Yes, they must be on their way here now, Xiao Hai Yang said hurriedly. The victim is named Feng Bin, 15 years old, in a senior middle year 1 at Yufeng High Middle School. He wrote that letter online for his teachers and parents. The medical examiner just took a look and said that the fatal wound may be on the neck. There are clear defensive wounds on his hands and head. It's likely he fought the killer before he died. We'll have to wait until they've taken him back to the examination to get more concrete information, Wondro said. What do they do in this child's family? Xiao Hai Yang immediately answered, according to the school registration materials, his father runs a small business and his mother is a housewife. They must be fairly well off, but he's not really rich. When his parents get here, I'll question them to find out whether they'd offended anyone in business recently. Lorenzo, perhaps deliberately, said, jabbing out his eyes and cutting off his limbs. Why do I think I've heard this somewhere? Xiao Hai Yang froze. Then he gently pushed at his glasses. Captain Law, have you heard of the National Road 327 serial robbery and murder case? And there you fall right into his trap. I mean, luckily, yeah. Law and Joe looked at him. A case from 15 years ago, Xiao Hai Yang said. Then, like a robot, his speech rapid, he recited the facts of the National Road 327 case as though he'd learned them by heart, not one word different from the summary online. Captain Law, the principal offender, Lu Guosheng, is still on the run. Could this have to do with him? Lowenthal narrowed his eyes. 15 years ago? You know all about what happened 15 years ago? How old were you then? Xiao Haiyang said, I read it on the internet, and my memory is really good. Your memory isn't only really good, it must be eidetic. Lowenthal stood up, indicating that the waiting medical examiner should collect the corpse, saying to Xiao Haiyang, your grades must have been pretty good when you were in school. Why did you have to be a police officer? Our salaries are so low. Xiao Haiyang seemed to have been shut up by this question. Flustered, he avoided his gaze. After a long pause, he pulled himself together. I've dreamed of being a police officer since I was little. You also wanted to save the world? Owendahl laughed, not asking him again. He only looked up towards the end of the street. There was an ambulance parked there. Lowendahl asked, he's so thoroughly dead. What did the ambulance come for? Xiao Haiyang let out a gentle sigh of relief. Oh, right, Captain Law. I just forgot to tell you. When the killer was committing the crime last night, there was an eyewitness on the scene. Oh, okay. The eyewitness is called Xiaonan, a girl in the same class as Feng Bin. A handful of students left together a few days ago. We don't know why it was just the two of them together. Perhaps they parted ways with the others. Xiao Haiyang followed Luo Wenzhou like a point and speak device. If you didn't know something, you could point at him and find out. When Feng Bin was killed last night, the girl was hiding in the garbage bin nearby. The boy may have wanted to protect her. As Luo Wenzhou strode towards the ambulance, he asked, since these students are still in the city, why haven't they been found after all this time? They got unregistered phone cards from somewhere. They're hard to trace. Xiao Haiyang paused, then said, anyway, they're all old enough to have taken money with them when they ran away, and they left a letter. No one really thought anything could happen to them. The local police are always busy.
more pressing things will sometimes take priority. I have very mixed feelings about that. Lowenjo had also done low-level police work, so of course he understood what was going on. He waved his hand to interrupt Shah Hayang. You mean these students both had their phones on them? When did the murder occur? Shah Hayang paused. The medical examiner just had a look. The initial conjecture is that it was before midnight. Before midnight? Lowenjo's steps paused. If there's nothing wrong with the girl, why didn't she call the police afterwards? Shahai Nan, sorry, Shah Shao Nan, the only eyewitness in this frightening dismemberment case, had not only not called the police, she'd spent half the night squatting in the garbage bin, giving the sanitation workers who found her such a bad scare that he'd cracked open a fast-acting heartful. The 15-year-old girl was very slender, with a small melon seed-shaped face and delicate features, a beauty in embryo, though her current condition wasn't especially dignified. She was rancid and reeking, sitting numbly in a corner, tightly clutching a backpack in her arms, her face dreadfully white, and her eyes pitch black, like a mindless life-size doll. When Lowenjo went over, he found that Lang Chao and a few other female police officers were there, along with a clutch of medical personnel, standing in a circle around Sha Xiaonan. None of them dared to approach. Lowenjo praised the strange atmosphere. What's going on? What are you all watching? Don't come over here, boss. The child may be in shock, Lang Chao said quietly. She doesn't react when you talk to her, and she screams if anyone comes close. Even that especially kind-looking doctor over there can't get near her. We're waiting for the parents now to see whether we can force a tranquilizer on her. Lo and Joel bent down, trying to meet the girl's line of sight from afar. Sha Xiaonan's gaze met his briefly, seeming unable to focus, immediately brushing past. A good number of police stations with the assistance of school and the parents have been searching for them for 3 or 4 days. All right, the police can't find them, and we let a bad guy get to them first, Lang Chao whispered. What do you call this? Look through the security cameras nearby. This is a scenic district. There aren't many blind spots, and the killer couldn't have been invisible. Aside from that, don't let the guys be idle. Send them to ask around the convenience stores, the supermarkets, and restaurants. A group of kids run away. They can't do without eating or drinking. Someone must have seen them. At this point, Lowenjo suddenly frowned, slightly pointing at the backpack in Xiaonan's arms. Erlang, look, what's that on your backpack? Is it filth or blood? Before Lang Chao could focus and have a close look, there was a sudden sound of sharp braking behind her, the tires letting out a sharp squeal as if opening up a rut in the ground. All the assembled police and doctors shuddered. Lang Chao turned to look and said in a whisper, "Oh no, I was afraid of this." An exquisitely dressed, middle-aged woman threw open the car door and flew out before her feet had touched the ground. Like a reed whipped around by a strong wind, she swayed for a few steps, then, without warning, fell to the ground, getting blood over half her body. Her face terrified, she grabbed the police officer, who rushed over to help her up, nearly pulling his pants off. "Where's my son? Where's my Bin Bin?" "Oh, no, I don't want to deal with this." "That seems to be the victim, Bang Bin's mother," said Lang Chao quietly. "Tell the medical examiners to hurry up and get the body in a body bag." Lo Wen-jo pushed her lightly and said, "Don't let her see. Have her identify the face, and then quickly take it away. She can look when we've finished investigating and the body's been sewn back together."
was too late. Sunbin's mother was a thin and frail middle-aged woman without any flesh on her body, but when she saw the medical examiners go into a little alley, she immediately leapt up and with extraordinary strength pushed away her husband and the police officer trying to hold her back, needing to rush forward to see. She took one look at the torn look that tore apart the rest of her life. Not making a sound, the woman sat down on the ground. The medical personnel who'd been watching Xiaonan had to rush up in a body to save her. She was carried away unconscious. As soon as she opened her eyes, Fengmen's mother saw Xiaonan curled up in a corner and shuddered violently, immediately reviving, falling over to grab her. Student, you know something, right? You know who killed my Binbin? With Finbin's mother pulling at her jacket, Shashanan's whole body spasmed, and she let out an inhuman-sounding howl. For a time, the sounds of crying and wailing, consolation, questions, and the teenaged girl's high-decibel, never-ending shriek bombarded everyone's ears, turning the scene into an unbearable mess. Owenjo's head swelled at the noise, and he put his hands over his ears, turning to look at the dim and antiqued little alley. Had the killer really been Lo Busham from 15 years before? If it really had been him, how should they account for it to the parents? Tell them that a spectre who'd roamed free for 15 years without the police having any hint of him had killed their son? Why would Lo Busham suddenly show himself? Did he have no money? And why would he fix on a middle school student? Was his strength failing after 15 years? Having no helpers with him, did he lack the confidence to attack an adult? Those were actually all very reasonable questions. Also, the victim Fungbin's body had been covered with his own school jacket, as if the killer had been worried he'd be cold. What did that indicate? Had the killer felt remorse and repentance after committing the crime? But if he really did still have this last remaining spark of human feeling, could he have dismembered an underage boy and smashed his eyes? And there goes my camera. Sorry, let me just quickly replace the battery. I forgot. Okay, we should be back and functioning again. Sorry about that. Okay, let's try and get to the end of the chapter before the end of the why. Fungbin's Why do I keep saying Binan instead of Bin? Fungbin's father falteringly backed up to the side of the road. He was suddenly powerless to take care of his wife's feelings.
He forced himself to maintain his calm. He had a businessman's sociable disposition. When Lord Joel looked over at him, he even nodded and seemed to be trying to smile, but the attempt failed. I've been too busy at work. I might not see him even a couple of times a month, and I sent him to a boarding school, as if he were a burden I had no place for, his father said. Was I wrong? Owen Joe didn't answer. As Swangan's father spoke, his spine folded up, and he squatted down, curling into a ball, slowly covering his face. Have Shashanan's parents been notified? Owen Joe pinched the bridge of his nose, turning to ask his subordinates. Where are they? Why aren't they here yet? When can they get the girl to talk? On the road, which was slowly coming to life, the first hint of traffic showed up. Suddenly, a motor-powered wheelchair came upstream against the current, traveling towards them. The old man in the chair must have thought this means of transportation was too slow. He was stretching out his neck, looking up ahead like an elderly tortoise. The wheelchair went over a pothole, and he overbalanced, falling out of the motor-powered wheelchair. Taran was nearby. Witnessing the small-scale traffic accident, he ran over to help the old man up. My goodness, sir, why did you come over here riding that thing? Are you all right? The road is closed up ahead. You can't. The old man struggled, grabbing Taran's wrist, saying indistinctly, Kwalan. Taran stared. What? The old man looked at him mournfully, his lips shaking. Xiaonan. Shashanan's parents both dead. There's only her grandfather. He had a stroke a few years ago with considerable after effects. His mind is clear, but it's hard for him to move around, and no one can understand him clearly when he speaks. By the time they got back to the city bureau from the crime scene, it was already noon. Having used an extraordinary degree of Chinese listening comprehension, Taran had managed to communicate with Shashanan's grandfather. He sighed. It's too pitiful. It would have been better if he just lost his mind altogether. I don't know how I feel about that statement, but I can't imagine how frustrating it must be for her grandfather to want to communicate and not being able to do so effectively. Lowenthal asked, how could she attend a boarding school with a family background like that? Her family is very poor, and her grandfather's medical fees couldn't all be covered by insurance. Yifeng was recruiting some good students for prestige, being very generous over school fees, and the old man is rather stubborn. He won't let anyone treat him like an invalid. He ordinarily does all the household chores himself, not letting anyone take care of him. The others are one thing, one of the criminal policemen next to him said, but I really can't understand how a girl like Shashanan could run away. I just looked it up, and the girl's senior middle school entrance exam scores were in the top 50 for the whole city. As long as she kept up her grades, Yuthan would have given her 20,000 yen in scholarship. And the teachers at the school say her temperament is introverted, but she's particularly sensible. She's never made anyone worry about her studies. Would she run away from school because she was lonely and bored? Could she have could she be hard-hearted enough to cast aside her grandfather? If so, the girl really has no conscience. And when George didn't respond, he pulled up the letter Fongan had left behind on his phone. The thing had gone quite popular online. The news of Fongan's murder hadn't gone out yet. People were still attacking the school system and the Chinese style of parenting. Onjo thought about it, then sent Fedu a link to the letter. When he'd sent it, someone put their head in at the door. Captain Law, Fungbin and Shashanan's homing teacher is here. Fedu's phone buzzed quietly, notifying him that he had a new message. His phone was lying under something, and he didn't hear it at first. Assistant, now I said that more like a cat noise than a name, and now I don't think I'm gonna be able to say it right. Passed over a pen for him to sign with and looked down at Loibo, arrogantly strutting around next to her. She really wanted to play with the cat while Fedu was reading the document, so she asked, President Fei, does the kitty scratch? Fedu said, yes. I wonder if it's just Fedu being like, you can't touch our pets. Assistant Mao. She quietly drew back her outstretched hand and looked all around the simply furnished, modern-style apartment. Are you living here now? Fedu gently pushed at his glasses, looking up at her. Oh, Assistant Mao hesitated, then very tactfully said, it feels very different from your office. It doesn't seem to be the same style. Fedu smiled noncommittally. Compared to his office, the overwhelming majority of human residences on Earth were as crude and impoverished as a public toilet, but that wasn't his style at all. Just then he came upon a framework agreement. Fedu skimmed it. There was nothing wrong with the contents, but there was a particular scent on the pages. He paused, then picked it up and smelled it. Mint, sweet basil leaves, and a trace of berry scent mixed in. Fedu raised his eyelids and looked at Assistant Mao. Assistant Mao gave him a weary smile. President Fei's indiscriminate appreciation, I know how to say words apparently, despite the struggle, for beauty was no secret. Even Zhang Donglai knew that he was partial towards an externally graceful and reserved but internally stimulating people and things. Often people would use this knowledge to bad ends. Peter put down the contract, got out a moist towelette, and wiped his hands. Since when has our company been so particular that even our printer paper needed to be specially made? What's our special relationship with the Sodi royal family? Assistant Mao quietly explained it's President Su's new assistants. Didn't President Su also invite me to dinner? Fedu laughed silently, but his expression was rather cold. Mao Su worked for my father for over a decade, so he thinks he's an elder statesman now and can act as a prince regent. Assistant Mao didn't dare respond. After Fedu had come to power, nearly all of the old President Fei's trusted aides had been dispersed. The better ones had been transferred elsewhere to enjoy their retirement. The worse ones had been sent directly to eat prison food on the strength of some wrongdoing. And there were others who had voluntarily resigned for all kinds of unexpected reasons. Now Suchong was the only elder statesman remaining, and he was the one with the most mediocre natural endowments. Are we talking like he's not smart, or like he's crude natured? I can't figure it out. Though I like his kind of self-important Though I like this kind of self-important idiot, when you get back, tell him that I have no time. At his age, he should wipe his own ass clean before trying anything else. Showing off these vulgar tactics is beneath his dignity. If someone wants to see me, they can come see me themselves. I don't especially like these roundabout methods. At this point, Fedu's tone changed, and he blinked at Assistant Mao, his voice turning mild. Why don't you guys block these things for me? Aren't you aren't you great leader? Aren't I your great leader? What? I haven't been back in so long you all don't love me anymore? Assistant Mao had long been accustomed to this inconsistency of his, suddenly turning hostile while also seeming to be joking. Without turning a hair, she asked curiously, who is it that President Su wants to recommend? Hmm? Who is it that wants President Xi to recommend them to you and is making him to do it in such an indirect way? Okay, I get the gist of that sentence, but it was a bit awkwardly said. Some insignificant people. Feidu quickly finished signing the remaining documents and took Assistant Mao to the door. Before she left, he remembered something, saying, "All right, haven't food prices risen lately? Tell HR to raise everyone's standard lunch stipend by 30%. You can only have the energy to work if you eat well." Oh, the small gestures, and the ones that actually really matter. Because he'd seen a price tag while chopping vegetables and asked a superfluous question, receiving a harangue from a certain person about it, not knowing the bitterness of the mortal world. Feidu didn't answer, using the tip of his foot to push Loy Bo back into the room. Smiling brightly, he shook hands with Assistant. Oh, damn, I skipped a full paragraph, my bad. The boss wanted to hand out money. Assistant Mao had absolutely no objection to this. She gave a crisp affirmative. Even her footsteps became more lively. President Fei, how do you know that food prices have risen? Because he'd seen a price tag while chopping vegetables and asked a superfluous question, receiving a harangue from a certain person about it, not knowing the bitterness of the mortal world. There we go. Feidu didn't answer, using the tip of his foot to push Loibo back into the room. Smiling brightly, he shook hands with Assistant Mao and bid her farewell. Feidu opened the window to disperse the lingering smell of perfume. Those people were too cautious. All these years they'd never shown a trace of themselves before him, but during the Zhou clan case, they'd been forced to break off their arm for survival, losing Zheng Kaifeng and Zhou Junmao, two of their major bankrollers. Now they must be struggling, needing urgently to dig up a new source of capital. It seemed that his conduct over the last few years, his confusing reputation, his externally lax but internally strict methods, his displays of wanting to pull out Chungyu's respirator at the seaside sanitarium, and his abandoning his enormous company and exhausting his resources to get involved in the new iteration of the Future Open project, all of this had finally laid the slow groundwork, forcing those people to start attempting to get in touch with him. Although Fredo pulled his phone out from under the dining table, planning to open the reading programs app, there was another force faintly discernible in all this. It even seemed to have unintentionally helped him. He tried again and again to investigate it without results. Who could it be? Just then he saw the link and the attached message that Law Windrow had sent him. Windrow said, "There's something wrong with this letter. Can you take a look at it for me?" There was a 40-something female teacher accompanied by a male student in the city bureau's reception room, chatting with the officer responsible for receiving visitors. These were Fin's homeroom teacher and class monitor. Zhou listened from the door for a while, glancing at the student's clothes. The boy had a school jacket hanging over the crook of his arm. Standing to one side, he seemed nothing like his awkwardly developed downy head peers. Seeing Zhou at the door, he gave him an urban smile, and Zhou somehow thought of the teenage Beidou. Looking closely, he found that the brand of the student's shirt was particularly familiar. He'd seen more than one of these when he was arranging the wardrobe for Feidu. The fact that we're just casually finding out that he arranged Feidu's wardrobe, as if that is not everything, sure. He had no idea how the name of the brand was meant to be read. A little whelp wearing such an expensive piece of clothing? Wondro frowned. Yunfeng Middle School really was a rich kids' club, boss. And Chow quickly walked over and quietly said into his ear, "The camera at the intersection caught the killer." Owen Joel turned his head at once. "I didn't know, so I asked some elders to have a look. It seems that it really was that Yorgosha." Dun dun dun. Okay, we went a little bit over the hour, but I really wanted to finish up that chapter, so I'm gonna take a quick 10-minute break and then we'll be back to try and finish 20 more pages. I hope we get there.
Okay, we're back. 20 pages might be a bit overly optimistic, but we're gonna keep going and try and get as far as we can. So we are on chapter 98, Romansky 8. I have to say, I really appreciate the fact that the chapters and the sub chapters match up in a sense. Let me just also in the chat back. I hope the audio is still okay. If there's anyone still watching. Because I know this is a bit of a long time. The boy Thungbin was at a crossroads near the drum tower. He waited there about then Xia Nan came. In the criminal investigation team's little conference room, Lang Chao opened a segment of security camera footage taken from the Golor district, near the place where the crime had occurred. Just the two of them? Where are the others? When Zhao came close to the watch, why do I feel like my brain's just become broken? Wen Zhao came close to watch the security camera footage. Wait, pause it. Look at what Feng Bin has in his hand. Wang Chao paused the recording and enlarged a part of it. Though it was night and there were few sources of light, through the high-definition camera you could still clearly see that Feng Bin was holding a plastic bag with the supermarket logo on it, and there were some snacks and drinks inside. They had all been adolescents. They knew at a glance what was going on with these two. The boy had found an excuse to leave first and waited for the girl at the prearranged spot, so the two of them could get away from their classmates' line of sight without anyone being the wiser, and secretly be alone for a while. These half-grown teenagers had gotten together to carry on a half-understood romance. Not having as many important subjects to rush towards as adults, they would often still have a touch of childhood innocence, like these funny and embarrassing snacks and Western fast foods. So this was why they'd left the others. BD Supermarkets. I think I remember that's a chain. Go determine how many of them there are in the Golor district and ask around at each one. The other children are likely nearby. Rowan Jaw turned his head to deliver orders, then said curiously, couldn't they have found a better place for their dates in the middle of the night? Why did they have to sneak into the drum tower? Wang Chao rolled her eyes like ping-pong balls towards him. Boss, are you a local? Rowan Jaw was perplexed. There's a little scenic spot behind the drum tower called Lover's Mirror. It's actually just a big polished stone. Legend says that if you stand in front of the Lover's Mirror, the reflection will rise to heaven. Sorry, I'm about to cough. I hope that didn't injure anyone's ears. The goddess's seventh daughter saw Dong Yong in that mirror and fell in love at first sight. The words celestial beings bestow agreement are printed beside it. When lovers stand in front of the lover's mirror, the gods bear witness and they'll be together their whole lives. I know this is an important scene for the plots. I still can't believe we ended up getting the scene that we end up getting. Like, hearing this rumor, which sounded like the kind of insincere propaganda handed out to tourists, Lowen Zhou snorted derisively. The Bureau of Civil Affairs isn't enough for you people. You need the Jade Emperor to grant you a certificate too. What do you get to buy a house What, do you get to buy a house if you collect 7 certificates? These brazen heterosexuals, truly they were never satisfied. Oh no. Well, I mean, considering, as far as I'm aware, you can't get married in China if it's a same-sex partnership, then, the great heavenly emperor might be the best way to go. Ling Chao, dot dot dot. She really was at a loss to understand how a pure and romantic, beautiful young girl like her had no boyfriend, but there was actually a man who was willing to take a bit of goods like Luo Wenzhou. Ouch, okay. Wenzhou changed the subject. The drum tower is a tourist attraction. They must clear people away when they close up in the evening. So did he get his eye on them when they snuck in? No. Meng Chao had to get down to business along with him. The killers started following them at the intersection. Watch. She pressed play again. The cameras at the intersection quietly spread out its line of sight, seeing off the boy and girl who didn't even dare to hold hands. The tranquil night was silent for a moment. Then a man suddenly appeared on camera. Seeing him on screen, Wenjol was startled, because this killer wasn't anything like the weakling who only dared to attack children that he'd imagined. At a visual estimate, this person was at least a meter seven was at least a meter 75 tall. I hope I'm reading that right. With a physique that could be described as healthy and strong. He was no older than 40. There was a cigarette in his mouth when he casually strolled over from the corner to follow Fengbin and Xiaoshanan at the moderate distance. But when Joel said, "Is there a shot of his face?" "There is. Another camera caught it. I've printed these out." Meng Chao handed out some printed screenshots to the colleagues around her. But when Joel took one look and was sure that this was without doubt Lu Guosheng, he'd, he'd closely examined the wanted poster from the National Road 327 case only last night. The principal offender's face had made a rather strong impression on him. Lu Guosheng's eyes weren't quite the same size. When he looked straight ahead, his eyeballs weren't quite aligned. His cheeks were gaunt, his chin long, his features deeply carved. The left corner of his mouth was a little crooked. The man in the screenshot was 38 or 39. There were some signs of passage of time on his face, but the outline of his features looked the same as before. The changes were small. You could see that Lu Guosheng had been living comfortably these last 15 years as a wanted criminal. He hadn't aged much. Before Lu Wenzhou could speak, Zhao Haiyang was already saying positively, "Yes, that's Lu Guosheng." This time, even Lang Chao gave him a strange look. Wenzhou nodded. "All right, Zhao Chao, keep talking." The killer followed them to the Drum Tower tourist attraction. To get in without buying a ticket, you have to take the side door. There are some narrow alleyways in between. You've seen the place, it's rather out of the way, and it all looks about the same. Very complicated. The killer struck there. You can watch the next part. I don't want to watch it a second time. Saying so, she put on the next segment of film, turned, and left. The segments of security camera footage came from a camera on a protective hip and gable roof of the drum tower. The shot was rather distant. In a little intersection of the edge of the frame, the two teenagers suddenly appeared, fleeing in confusion. There was none of the sweet and peaceful hand-holding atmosphere left. The boy's back was covered in blood. The girl stumbled as he pulled her, falling to the ground. Though there was no sound in the video, it still clutched at the heart.
The warm moonlight suddenly took on a raw, bloody edge. The teenager's affectionate but immature emotions had been disrupted by a suddenly appearing evildoer, a turn of events out of a nightmare. Enduring fear and panic, Feng Bin threw the items he was holding one by one at the human-shaped monster. Then pulling the beloved girl, he ran madly, fleeing by any path. They called for help as they ran, but the tourist attraction that had been cleared of the public was deserted. Perhaps their luck was bad and there was no one to hear, or perhaps the patrolmen had heard the cries of help and were afraid of bringing trouble to themselves, hiding further away instead of going over to help. The human-shaped monster's footsteps were already right behind them. As they cried out to heaven and earth in the empty streets, neither heaven nor earth answered. The drum tower full of man-made romance cast down its cold gaze. At this critical juncture, Feng Bin, in his panic, lost his way in the intricate little alleys. The two of them, turning this way and that, circled back to where they'd started from, running right into the knife-wielding killer. Everyone in the conference room broke out in cold sweats as they watched the scene. Someone even jumped up and hit the corner of the table. Holding on to Shashaman, Feng Bin turned and ran. He saw guard booth not far off. As if seeing the light of dawn, the boy ran desperately towards it, hitting the window of the booth. Somebody, anyone, come help them. But his last hope very soon turned to hopelessness. There was no one in the guard booth. The criminal was now in front of them, the bloodied knife less than 50 meters away. Shashanam's face was as pale as death with fright. Feng Bin, in his panic, chose the worst possible path. The alley where the murder had happened was a dead-end street. What they found after they ran into the little alley wasn't caught on camera. About half an hour later, Lo Guosheng left the little alley. He took off his jacket, put it on inside out to cover up the bloodstains, and very calmly walked away. There was dead silence in the conference room. And Chow had her back to the screen. "Have you finished?" Someone whispered. "I'm going to throw up. This is a horror film." So Lu Guosheng chased two children into a dead-end street, then killed one and left the other behind? Why? The Windjaw spoke first, to break the strange atmosphere. "We saw the scene of the crime. Those two garbage bins were the only place where a person could hide. The children were scared out of their wits and made two fatal mistakes. Running into a dead-end street was one of them. The girl had no way out. Hiding in the garbage bin was the only thing she could do. Think about it. If you were the killer in the situation, wouldn't you open up the lids of the garbage bins to have a look?" Owenjo's gaze went around the conference room. "Unless the girl can turn invisible, then there's something wrong with Lu Guosheng's head. Was Shashanan injured?" "No," said Lang Chao. "I just confirmed it with the hospital. Aside from when she fell herself, there are no other evident wounds on her, and she wasn't sexually assaulted. Also, the DNA stains on her backpack really are blood. They're extracting the DNA for comparison now, but they don't have a result yet." Lowenjo asked, "Were Shasha were Shashanam's wallet, phone, and other valuables in her backpack?" And Chow stared. "No, you mean..." Taran put in a word. "In the National Road 327 case, Lu Guosheng snatched every penny he could, leaving the victims with nothing." And Chow frowned, feeling that she hadn't been conscientious enough about her work. Otherwise, why would everyone else be as familiar with the details of the so-called National Road 327 case as though enumerating their family treasures, while she didn't know anything? Also, when Feng Bin was calling for help on the way, where had the patrolmen and on-duty personnel at the tourist attraction gone? Owen Joel said. Were they all apparently not at their posts, or had they talked it over and decided not to get involved in others' misfortunes? Contact the tourist attraction and summon everyone on the night shift. I mean, that's a fair concern. In a case where the suspect and his means were thus evident at a glance, it seemed that the only thing left to do was to put out another wanted notice for Lo Guosheng. But in the midst of such simple cause and effect, there was a host of questionable points, as if the case was hidden in the drum tower's drizzling night mist. Rowan Joe lit a cigarette at the end of the corridor. Then, suddenly seeming to sense something, he turned to look at the busy criminal investigation team. Lao Yang's words were caught like a fishbone in his throat. There are people there who have changed. Lord Zhou got out his phone and dialed the City Bureau's HR department. Hello, Director Li, it's Xiao Luo from the Criminal Investigation Team. Oh no, I haven't been working hard. Well, my superiors want me to write an evaluation for a new colleague. Who knows what's gotten into Lao Lu now? Could you send me the Criminal Investigation Team's new child's CV and political examination materials? Thank you, thank you. I know another day I'll treat you to a meal. Because the City Bureau had gotten involved, the pace of the investigation went from that of an ox pulling a cart to that of space age. Sorry. Before evening that day, the brats no one had found a trace of for the better part of a week were all brought back. The police had found the BD supermarket where Feng Bin had bought snacks, discovering on the supermarket security cameras that the runaway students had all gone through there to buy stuff more than once, and guessed they had to be staying nearby. Following a brief search in a radius around the supermarket, all of them were found at a convenience hotel and brought back. One of the students, perhaps while chasing celebrities, had gotten to know the hotel lobby's manager and gotten them in through the back door without registering. Sorry, I don't know why my throat is being difficult now. The four students wiltingly stood lined up against the wall in the reception room, explaining in front of their homeroom teacher and the police why they'd wanted to run away. They said that there was too much stress at school and Christmas was coming up, so they'd gone out together to relax. Their parents, burning with impatience, were exasperated when they heard this disgraceful reason, wanting nothing better than to slap these brats until they turned into spinning tops. At the same time, the drum tower's employees were being interrogated by turns, turning up something fishy. The tourist attraction security department, from the person in charge down to the patrolman, had long-standing problems. They were all remiss in their duties. It was common practice among them to get together to gamble during the night shift. Now that something happened, this finally came out. I mean, at least it's not something more conspiratorial than that. It's just people being terrible at their jobs. Sorry. Let me just see. I so badly want to get to 100 pages, so we'll see if I can stick it out. At this point, aside from the murderer Lu Guosheng still being on the loose, and the shocked girl still being in a stupor in the hospital, this whole case seemed to have been uncovered. The students who had been brought back were taken away by their parents and teachers one after another. One of the boys was roughly pulled forward by his mother, with his enraged father's handprint on his face, swollen to twice its original size. His physiological tears were flowing non-stop. In the sorry state, he still kept turning his head, staring abjectly towards the city bureau. Lowen Joel, who was seeing them to the gate, was thoughtful for a moment, then called him to a halt. "Student, wait a moment." The boy's parents stopped, hurriedly forcing down their anger, politely asking, "Is there something else, comrade police officer?" Lowen Joel walked over and considered the boy. He was a fair-skinned teenager, slightly fat, crying as he walked, looking a little younger than the other students, who in reality were his peers. He seemed to be somewhat introverted. As soon as he saw Lowen Joel approach, he lowered his head uncomfortably. Lowen Joel said, "What's your name?" The boy quietly stammered, "Jimmy Fun." Lowen Joel kept his voice as gentle as possible, asking, "Is there something you'd like to say to me?" The boy's under the boy's underdeveloped larynx, I think, moved gently, the gazes of his teacher and his classmates at once falling on him. Lorenzo frowned. Suddenly, those silent gazes made him uncomfortable for some reason. Zhang Yifan's father couldn't stand his son's mincing manners. He raised a hand like a bear's paw, firmly slapping the boy's back. "If there is, then say it. And if there isn't, then say there isn't. Does it take so much effort to say a few words? Just looking at you makes me angry." The boy's face was panicked, like a person with social anxiety forced to talk to a powerful stranger. He began crying again at once, blurting out, "There's nothing." Lowen Joel wanted to follow up when the boy buried his face against his mother's shoulder, walking away as quickly as though he were escaping. Lang Chao stretched, walking over. "Boss, this matter seems to have been resolved for now. When are we writing our report?" "Don't be in such a hurry." Lowen Joel watched the boy leave hurriedly, then hung his jacket over his arm. "I'm going to go get an expert opinion first." Lang Chao stared. Before she could work out who the expert was, Lowen Joel asked her with a genial expression, "Char, what do you want for breakfast tomorrow?" "Buns." Lang Chao didn't have a sliver of suspicion of his ill intent, gladly saying, "Thank you, Imperial Father." The Wonjo looked at her with a fake smile and walked away. Okay, so it's not a full third hour, but considering the state of my voice right now and the fact that we are at the end of the chapter, I think I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead. But I hope you guys still enjoyed it, and I'm so excited to continue with this. I kind of did a little bit of calculations, and if I go at the pace that I usually go with these, we're not going to get done before I leave for holiday. So I'm going to try and squeeze in a few more read-alongs before the 13th of December. The next one that I'm hoping to do is either going to be on Thursday or it will be on Saturday. It just kind of depends. Yeah, no, I'm very, very happy to be back. It's been way too long, and I'm glad to have a reason to be back. So yeah, I will see you guys either in 2 days or in 4 days. 再见。